Hello, welcome to the Student Learning Support Services English Language Support Program. I'm Lauren, and today we're going to be talking about clauses and simple sentences. So basically, what are the building blocks of our sentences? Now, it is important to talk about what sentences are because these are the building blocks of good writing. Good sentences allow us to communicate our thoughts and ideas clearly, and with good sentences, we build good paragraphs, and with good paragraphs, we build good essays. But there are a few important components to a sentence, and understanding what these are will allow us to have a lot of flexibility and creativity in the way that we put sentences together, and therefore how we structure and articulate our ideas, something that is very important in good academic writing. So a sentence requires, at its very simplest form, a subject, a verb, and a complete idea. So a subject is the noun of the sentence. It is the thing or person who is doing the thing of the sentence. The verb then is what they are doing. And a complete idea, that is a little bit trickier. It basically means that we haven't just left our reader hanging, left with an unfinished thought. For example, if I was to just say that a complete sentence requires, this is not a complete sentence, is it? Because yes, I do have my subject, I have a verb, but this thought is not finished. A complete sentence requires what? If, however, I was to say something like the teacher sighed, here I also have the same basic components. I have also got an article, I have the noun, the subject of the sentence, teacher, and I have a verb, sighed. But the difference here is that the verb sighed doesn't require an object. It doesn't need to act on something in order to make sense. And so while these two sentences have the same basic components, there's this really important difference, and that is the idea of a complete or finished thought that separates them. But I can even simplify this again, and I can just say, Lauren sighed. Now I don't even have an article. Now I just have two words in my sentence, but it is a complete and finished sentence because I have a complete and finished thought. The verb sighed doesn't require anything more to make sense. Every sentence contains a main clause. Now, this is the independent clause of the sentence, and it may also contain one or more dependent clauses, and these are those unfinished parts of the sentence that need to be connected to our independent clause. We make up our sentences with different combinations of independent and dependent clauses, and understanding what each of these are, how we connect them together, and how we can use them in various combinations will give us a lot of flexibility and creativity in our writing. Now, an independent clause can stand on its own. It is strong enough that it doesn't need anything to support it. If we have a look at this example, she can leave the office now. You'll see that I have a subject, she, I have a verb, leave, and of course the thought is finished. I know what this person is leaving. Now, you'll also notice that the verb leave has a tense. And this is really important, because it can't just be any verb that make up our sentences. They must be finite, meaning they belong to a tense. We know when they take place. If instead I said leaving the office now, this is not a finite verb. It's a participle, okay? It doesn't have a tense. I'm also, of course, missing a subject here, so I don't know who is leaving or when they are leaving. And so this is not an independent clause. This is a dependent clause, and that means it cannot stand alone as a sentence. Now, when we have a dependent clause without its friend, the independent clause that it needs to stand up on its own, we end up with sentence fragments. Now, sentence fragments are actually really common in speech. We use them all the time. So, for example, if my friend asks me, "Where did you put the dirty dishes?" I might reply in a sentence fragment, "The sink in the kitchen." In a conversational context, I maybe don't need to clarify that I put them in the sink in the kitchen. But of course, in formal and in academic writing, I do. The sink in the kitchen, is not enough to stand on its own as a sentence. It is a sentence fragment. If, however, I said I put them in the sink in the kitchen, this now becomes an independent clause, and I can have this as a sentence in my formal writing. So, just to summarize, an independent clause contains at least a subject and a verb. It is a complete thought. It on its own makes up a simple sentence and it makes sense. A dependent clause, by contrast, is an incomplete thought. It needs the main clause to make sense. Now, simple sentences, as I said, are made up of a single independent clause, but don't let this fool you, because it doesn't mean that they are necessarily uncomplicated or that they're necessarily short. For example, a simple sentence may look like this: you look tired today. Or I might say, hand hygiene is critical in a clinical context. Now, I could have just stopped after critical, but of course in this case I need to add this extra information to provide more context for my meaning. Or I might say, Meg and her friend had lunch together. In this case I have two subjects who share the same verb, but this is still a simple sentence. Or I might say the authors disagree on the first idea but agree on the second. Now, this is where things get a little bit confusing. This is still a simple sentence made up of a single independent clause, because although I have two verbs, they are still attached to the same single subject. I haven't introduced a new second subject. And this brings me to my next point, which is that simple sentences on their own don't require any extra punctuation, okay? Remember, they are a single self-contained clause. So, taking this last example, the authors disagree on the first idea but agree on the second. Many of us are tempted to add this little comma in, but that's actually incorrect. However, if I said the authors disagree first idea, but they agree on the second, there's a little bit of a difference here that we're going to unpack more in our next video, and that is the fact that I've added a second subject. Even though the pronoun they is still technically the same subject, I'm still talking about the authors, this is a new pronoun. And so that means that I've now got actually two independent clauses that I am joining together, and therefore I do use a comma. As I said, I'm going to deconstruct this more in the next video. So to fix the first one, all I need to do is take away my comma, and now I have that single independent clause. So next, we're going to unpack this idea a little bit more. We're going to talk about compound and complex sentences. So how do we put two independent clauses together, as we've just done in that last example? And then we're going to look at complex sentences, which is where we're joining an independent clause with one or more dependent clauses. So check those out, and I will see you then to keep building our sentence construction skills. That's all from me. I will see you then.